Welcome to our Planning and Paying for College workshop. Please join me in thanking our host, Rush-Henrietta High School, and the 5 private independent colleges and universities that are here with us today. This event would not have been possible without the support of a federal College Access Challenge grant that was awarded to the New York State by the New York State Higher Education Services Corporation to the Commission on Independent Colleges and Universities, and that's the organization that I represent. So I'm Susan Nesbitt Perez. I'm here with my colleague Sabra, who helped sign you in out in the hallway, and we're delighted to join you here today with these amazing panelists who share a great deal of expertise and knowledge about admissions and financial aid. It's a big space, but we're a small enough group that I hope that you will feel comfortable enough to raise your hand. If not, you have index cards, and I'll be happy to circulate and collect those and bring them up here to the panelists as well. With that, I want to say that you should all have received a little pink ticket when you signed in. If not, let me know. We're going to have giveaways at the end of this presentation and before we move into the cafeteria. So with that, I'd like to get started because we have a lot of information to share, and I know you're burning with questions. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Bill Short, who will introduce the panelists and himself, and we'll begin. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan, and I thank all of you for coming out because we traveled from various distances, and we're glad that you're here to make the travel, whether we're short or long, worth our while. So, according to our agenda, yes, I'm going to do the PowerPoint first, right? So, we'll walk through this, a little bit of background information, then we'll get to the panel and we'll get to your questions, and I assure you our answers will be brilliant, keeping in mind my initials are BS. So I'm not going to read these to you. I detest it when people read PowerPoints, but a little bit of background about who CICU is, representing the private colleges around the state. And I'm certainly not going to read you that whole list, but can you see any of that from the way back? Probably not. Can I get a head shake or a head bob? No? Okay. I'm not going to read them all to you, but you can go on the website, you can find this out, but suffice to say that these are colleges all over the state of New York. They are right here in this city. They're as far up north as Clarkson and St. Lawrence, up along the St. Lawrence Seaway. That's where I'm from New York City, from out on Long Island. There are big schools that you've heard of, small schools you haven't. We in New York are very fortunate. We have probably the richest higher education set of options of the entire country. And here's a big part of why that is. Okay. I assume you're here because you think going to college is a good idea, or if you're a parent, because you think your kid going to college, that is a good idea. Why? Well, here's one of the reasons we all know. The research is pretty clear. Just look at the bar chart. The more education that you have, the more income that you're going to have. Higher education still remains, even though there are challenges, and we've all heard of people who've got a degree and not able to find a job. Those situations do happen. But believe me when I tell you that the recent recession hit people without a college education far more than it hit people with a college education. So this is still the most powerful way to change your personal socioeconomic situation for the better. College is possible. That's why we're here tonight, to talk about all the different ways that it's possible, and we hope to offer you some insights into things that maybe you hadn't thought about, maybe didn't occur to you, and this will give you some momentum to ask good questions that'll move you forward. And look at the stats. Financial aid isn't just for a few people. Okay. When you're getting ready to go, when you're in the fall of your senior year, show of hands, how many are going into senior year next year of the students? Okay, so good whack of you. How many are going into 11th grade? Okay, going into 10th? Going into 9th? Okay, so There are aspects of this for all of you, even if you're going into 10th. It's not too early to start looking and start asking questions. And of course, you're here, so you know that. But if you're going into your senior year, you'd better start to get very serious. Putting together all the information that you need in your application, both for admission and for financial aid, is a detailed, laborious process. You may have good college counseling available to you in school. You may not. I don't know your schools particularly. I don't know if, not everybody's from this school, is that right? Anybody here not from Rush-Henrietta? Okay, well, you're all, okay, we got a little bit. Okay, so you actually have pretty good counseling here, and that's a good thing. But there are schools where that is not the case. But you're still responsible for your own work. You have to keep on top of your applications, your questions, and you're going to get bombarded, you probably already are, with information from colleges flooding your email. So you're going to have to figure out how to sort that and keep the ones you want. Okay. And know that there are different kinds of colleges, and among that list, these kinds of colleges were all represented in the CICU list. So just a quick snapshot, to get started. Do you want to get a certificate in a trade and get started working right away? Do you want to go for a 2-year program that's a little more time? Certificates usually take a year. 2-year program takes a little more time, gives you a few more options. Or do you want to head for a 4-year degree, which is going to, the further you go, the more education you have, the more options you'll have. So you have more latitude, the ability to change. So think about the whole stratum. And it is also possible to start in one and move along as you evolve. So you can start at a 2-year school and move up to a 4-year school if you decide later, yeah, that's a good idea. And we can come to when that may or may not make sense in the Q&A part, because I don't know if you want to know that. Okay. Here's a very broad set of instructions, things that will guide you in how to be organized. That first bullet point on the prior slide. So do your online research, do your college fair, pick our brains tonight. Most of us are willing to talk about who our schools are, but also maybe some other options as well, who are not our own schools. At least I do that. Go to college fairs, but when you go to a college fair, know what makes sense to ask. Ask useful questions. Don't come to a college fair and ask us stuff that you could have figured out online, because you're just wasting your time. Come to a college fair with some questions that are inspired by what you found out online, but you couldn't get that answer. And we'll come to some of those things too. So think about, what would your life be like on the campus? Academics is up there first because that should be the most important thing. This school has the program I want. That's top of my list, this range of schools. What is it going to be like to live there? How far away is it? What is it going to cost me? That's a big part of what we'll talk about tonight. And then make sure that you have the Lucky 3 list. It says reach school, realistic school, and safety school, but you can actually pluralize those. You don't have to have just one in each of those categories. So a reach is one that you really would love to go to, but you're not sure that you have the academic credentials to get into that school. That's a reach. Realistic, yes, you line up pretty well. Good chance you're going to get in. Safety school, you know you're getting in. So that if all other options fail, at least you have an option that you know you can get to. That's a safety school. Okay. Actually, I'm going to go back and I'm going to give you a safety school joke. I'm going to kind of dump on one of my competitor schools. Right? I get to do that? But they're out of state. Okay. So St. Lawrence University plays ice hockey at Division I, and we play the Ivy League schools. So one night in Appleton Arena on our campus, I'm sitting there, and there's a couple of guys from Dartmouth's hockey team sitting right behind me. And we're beating up on them bad. Our student section starts to chant, "Safety school." And I turned around to the guys and I said, I'm kind of sorry, but they were laughing. They said, we wish our students would get into it like that. That also goes back to what's life like on the campus. Do the students get into things? Are they lively? Or are they a bunch of not very active? So, okay. Okay, coming back to where we are. To be successful in admission, of course, staying on top of things, being organized, but then considering all of these elements that are here. All of them are important. And our panelists are going to touch on a couple of these things too. So I won't go into a whole lot of depth here, but believe me, everything here is important. Nothing is unimportant. And because we need to see, as much as we can, figure out who you are based on, well, electronic records that look like pieces of paper. If we haven't met you, how will we know you? This builds the picture of you. So put in time, put in care, make sure that you're being as complete as you can. And with things like extracurricular activities, that can include working outside the home. That can include taking care of younger brothers and sisters, taking care of an elderly relative. That can not just school-based stuff. That all gives us some insight into your character. So it's all important. Don't leave it out. Okay. Now we come to the money part. College costs, you know, one of the questions I get at college fairs all the time is, what's your tuition? That's not a helpful question. I understand why you want to ask it, but you're not actually asking the relevant question. You want to know, what is your comprehensive cost? If I'm going to live on your campus, then I have to think about room and board. I'm going to have to think about books and supplies. I'm going to have to think about transportation to get there. So all of these things you have to think about as part of paying for college. It's not just tuition, which tuition is only the cost of the classes. So this is what I mean. Drill in on the webpage, do your homework, find out what these costs are, and then ask us, how do we help you meet those costs? And that's what we're doing tonight. Okay. You can see some examples there of different costs, but again, I can't tell anybody sitting in this room what you would pay. A private four-year college with a $40,000, almost $41,000 price tag, that doesn't mean that everybody in this room would be writing a check for $40,000 a year. You probably would not. So you can't even ask me what's it going to cost me until you fill out financial aid applications. We'll come to that. Here are some ways to pay. And this is, if you can see down on the bottom, the Sallie Mae and Gallup, which are a couple of organizations that research things, put together a study of how America pays for college last year in 2013. Here's a pie chart of how that happens. Grants and scholarship, that's free money. Relatives and friends, that's free money with a price tag. You got to go move their couch when they need it. Student income and savings, working after school. Remember I mentioned that? There's a little slice for you. Parent incomes and savings. Parents, you already know you're on the hook for some of this. Parent borrowing, that's what you don't have, but you'll pay back later. And of course, the student borrowing at 18%. So you can see it's really distributed around that pie. There's not one great big chunk that's most, although note that the free money is the biggest. Okay. And then there's merit-based financial aid. The way I usually summarize that is, you're cool, we like you, we want to help make this more affordable, so here's some money. And it's not based on whether your family needs it or not income-wise, it's based on your qualities as a student. We want that on our campus. That's how I summarize that. Need-based, that means that's based on what your family's financial circumstances are. Formula takes into account how many live in the household, how many incomes there are in the household, how many of those people are in college at the time, factors like that. And the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid, I'll say it now, the first F in FAFSA is free. If you go to a website that charges you to prepare a FAFSA, they are charging you for something that's free. Draw your own conclusion about that. Scholarships, there's the scholarships that we grant as institutions, but there are also outside scholarships that you get maybe from community organizations. Rochester's actually got quite a few that are offered around this city. Wegmans does a bunch. There's some other foundations that do a bunch. So do your homework, look around, see who's got some money that might help you out. While you are a student on campus, you can also work. In fact, you might be expected to work. And that's our research shows that students who work on campus actually do better academically as well. You have to be more organized, you have to be more thoughtful about how you're spending your time, but academic results are actually tied to that as well. And it helps keep down those later loan costs. So the more you can earn while you're in school is less that you might have to pay back later. Speaking of paying back later, so you've got a couple of, you notice there's the first two are federal loans. Perkins loans are the ones that have the lowest interest rate, the most favorable terms. Colleges award those at their discretion to the students who need it the most. Stafford loans are also a federal loan. Some of those are subsidized, meaning that you're not paying interest as long as you make any payments at all as long as you're a student, and they're not adding interest either as long as you're a student. 6 months after you leave school, that starts to kick in, and the interest rate is still subsidized to remain low. It's, where is it now, 6 something? You guys know off the top of your head? On the Stafford loan, 6.4 maybe?
Yeah.
Percent? Am I remembering that right? You can't hear me?
We can
Okay.
barely hear you over here.
Oh, really?
Yes.
You guys can hear me, right? Okay. Stafford loan interest rates right now?
About 6.4, 6.
6.4? Okay. I'm not losing it. Good. Okay.
6.8.
And these are based on need. These are based on filling out the FAFSA, and they are the students' loans, not parents' loans. So the parents are not responsible for these students. You are. And it is not based on any kind of credit history. It's based on your financial need. Okay. We already touched on the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid. You're going to start that in January because you are using the immediate prior year income tax information. So if you are going into your senior year, that means you're going to use parents and your own if you worked 2014 income information for entering school in 2015, because that'll be the complete year. And obviously you don't have that information until the end of January when W-2s come out. Okay? But you can start collecting all the other stuff that you need ahead of time. You can open up the account earlier than that in the beginning of January. Okay, and there's the website, FAFSA.gov. There is a FAFSA.com. They will charge you to fill out the same exact form that FAFSA.gov will give you for free. Enough said. Okay. Here's a little flow chart of how that works. And remember, you're going to have counselors. You're going to get contact information from folks up here. People will be available to help you again in January. I don't expect everybody to remember all these steps come January of 2015. But you're going to do that as soon as you can. You're going to reapply for financial aid every year that you're a student because families' financial circumstances can change. So you have to renew that every single year, but it gets easier. The first year is the most detailed. The renewals are much easier for most people. Then the federal government, that goes through the feds. They send it back to you and also to the colleges you identify, so we can tell. One of the important things that tells us is your EFC, your expected family contribution. That's how much the formula says you and your family can afford out of your own pocket. And everything else is your need. So we kind of talked about this a little bit. Based on a number of factors like the number in the household, how many are in college, things like that. That's what that's based on, and how much income there is. And there are online EFC calculators. You can give yourself a little snapshot preview if you're curious. They're fairly accurate, but don't bank on it necessarily, but it's a good way to begin to think about it. So, okay. Cost of attendance, we will flash back a few slides to all those costs of attendance. Less your EFC is your financial aid need. Remembering that you have to add in direct costs, which is tuition, room and board if it's residential, and also indirect costs, which is textbooks, that travel to and from campus, that kind of stuff. The technical term for the difference between the amount of financial aid you have and the EFC, what you can afford yourself, if there's any amount of money not covered in the difference, that's called a gap. So you want to, as the Brits would say, mind the gap. That's what you got to figure out. That's the hard part. Okay. Here are some sample financial aid packages. I know you can't read that from where you are. So in the first one, I'll just give you a little snapshot here. In the first one, you've got a cost of attendance. You have a freshman living on campus with a family of 4, New York State residents, but you're all New York State residents, 1 in college. Cost of attendance is $40,000. Based on the FAFSA, this family has a 0 EFC, in other words, nothing coming out of pocket. The institution is granting $24,355 of institutional grant. Then there's a federal grants, Pell and SEOG. Pell and SEOG are both grants that are offered by the federal government, administered by the financial aid office on the college campus, and based on your need. So this individual is getting a full Pell Grant of $5,645. New York State also has a need-based grant called TAP, Tuition Assistance Program. That's in here at $5,000 contribution. The student is expected to earn $1,500 in work study. That's $1,500, and this will be over a year. So you're talking about $750 a semester. And then we have in federal loans, we have $3,500, and that adds up to $40,000. So what you have is $40,000 cost of attendance, $40,000 financial aid package with a 0 EFC. There's no gap there. Make sense? Math quiz? Okay. I saw lots of note-taking. Not really. But this is the kind of thing that you're going to have to be familiar with when you start getting offers of admission and financial aid from the colleges. You're going to have to know how to read, how to make sense of this stuff, and make sure. The most important thing is, does that total financial aid package and does that cost of attendance and what we can afford ourselves, do all of those things line up so that this is actually affordable? Okay. I'm not going to take the time to go through each one of these examples in detail, but is this on the CIC webpage? It wasn't one. Yeah. Oh, and it's in the book that you got too. So good. I won't go through it all in detail. You have that. So okay. But take a little time to look at that, familiarize yourself, and that'll give you the vocabulary to ask us questions. So if you want to know what does your school do in terms of institutional aid, that kind of thing, this is a good starter set of what to ask. Okay. Besides that, there's other options. You can set up a tuition payment plan so that EFC that's got to come out of pocket doesn't have to come all at once. Then you can explore other loans. There are Federal Plus, which is a parent loan that parents take out, or a private student loan. Those tend not to have the favorable rates and subsidy that the federal stuff has, but if it's the only way to make up a little bit of the difference, it's an option. And then if something changes between when you filed your financial aid application and when it's actually time to go to college, maybe a family member has lost a job, something like that, those things happen. You can discuss that with financial aid, and maybe that'll come up in the Q&A. Okay, reminders, we're closing in on the part where you hear me talking at you. Staying organized is always a critical step. Start thinking about it, start gathering paperwork. If you're going into your senior year, start now. But at least understand what it is if you're going into 11th or 10th grade. Think about what makes a winning application. You can ask us that too. What do you look for in a student? Make some good choices about the colleges that you're applying to. And go with the ones you know about right now, but dig deeper. Look into some that you haven't heard of too. You might get a fantastic deal, a great financial aid package, and a great education with all kinds of cool extras like study abroad and things like that, internships, in sponsored research, things that go beyond the classroom that really take you further in your career at a school you never heard of. Okay. Make sure you're on that FAFSA and apply for every scholarship you can. And now, here we go. We're going to turn it over to our panel of experts. So we have, well, I'll let them do most of their own self-introduction. I'll start at the far end with Toby. They're going to introduce themselves and a couple of takeaways they want you to know.
Hi, my name is Toby Dye, and I'm with the Rochester Institute of Technology. And I guess the one thing that I'd like to point out is that even if you think you may not qualify for financial aid, still fill out the FAFSA, which is the free application for federal student aid. Because even if you don't qualify for what we call need-based financial aid, you may still qualify for loans that would help you with financing college.